Thank you so much for joining us today as we prepare to celebrate International Women's Day and think about what we can do as an international community and as leaders in our organizations and in our countries to promote the participation of women in the public sector and in public service, and also thinking about how we can introduce or design policies in our administrations that can promote the participation of women in the economy, such an important aspect of recuperating from this horrible crisis that all our countries have been experiencing, and also hopefully to make a big push and change some of the ways we do things to promote more women's participation both in our public organizations, including customs administrations around the world, and also to promote women's participation in the economy, which is so vital for our economy's welfare and the future of our countries at all levels of development. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our speakers today, or those who are joining us for this interesting dialogue. And I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Katherine Baer. I'm an assistant director in the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, and I will be moderating our chat today or hosting our chat today. I'd like to welcome Vice President Maria Alejandra Muñoz from Ecuador, who was previously the head of Customs Administration in Ecuador, and I'm sure we'll have lots of interesting insights into the questions that we're going to be talking about today. And I'd also like to welcome the Commissioner of Customs in Jamaica, Velma Rickets-Walker. And we're so thankful that you were able to join us today, I'm sure also with a series of insights into some of the topics that we'll touch upon. So I look forward to our chat and some of the observations, and hopefully they'll be inspiring ideas for others. So with your permission, let me begin with my first question, and I'll start with Vice President Muñoz. Can you tell us a little bit about your career? It's a general question, just a little bit about your career and your path, both to the Customs Administration and, of course, now to the Vice President's office in Ecuador. Thank you.
Gracias, Katherine. Velma, qué alegría poder compartir contigo este espacio. Mi carrera, yo definiría mi carrera con tres líneas. Es una carrera celosamente cuidada, con mucha disciplina, pero una carrera donde mi enfoque ha sido fortalecer o darme herramientas para fortalecer el talento. Es bien importante porque es una suma de herramientas a lo largo de la vida orientadas al talento y al liderazgo. La funcionalidad se aprende cuando desarrollas el talento y cuando desarrollas el liderazgo. Entonces, empecé estudiando comercio en el colegio con una clarísima posición de sociales y políticas, comportamiento humano. Sin embargo, quería entender comercio y administración precisamente como una herramienta para el liderazgo. Luego estudié ciencias sociales y políticas. Luego estudié abogacía, pensando en cómo entender la lógica de la administración de lo público, de lo que es de todos, de no solamente lo que es mío, sino lo que es de todos, que es de lo más difícil que tenemos los seres humanos, entender cómo se administra lo que es común. Y estudié Derecho por eso, y por la lógica que te da el derecho, por la capacidad para entender los problemas sociales y políticos de los países. Luego tuve inserciones en la vida de distintas herramientas adicionales, manejar crisis, experiencia no solamente desde la perspectiva profesional, sino tener herramientas de manejo de crisis. Entonces estudié manejo de crisis, estudié manejo de confianza en las instituciones, lo que es el compliance, el cumplimiento y la confianza para ser desarrollada en las instituciones. Y luego agregué un poco más, agregué a la mujer, la inclusión de la mujer en la vida pública y en la vida privada fue parte de mis estudios y de las herramientas que he venido sumando. Y luego el entorno internacional, entorno político, entorno económico, que permite a través de los datos tomar decisiones. Todos estos pasos disciplinados con miras a fortalecer liderazgo y talento. Y es así como cuando fui invitada a formar parte de la aduana del Ecuador, y de pronto era un área, una cartera de Estado de Seguridad Nacional y de Comercio Internacional, era un reto principalmente de liderazgo, de administración y de inclusión, donde pude mezclar y juntar todo lo que he aprendido en la vida y ponerlo al servicio del país. Y esa es un poco la historia de cómo compuse y cómo he compuesto hasta mis 42 actuales años la carrera, que espero que esté todavía lista para seguir sumando otras herramientas.
Thank you very much, Maria Alejandra. That's, I think, a very nice way of connecting how one prepares oneself with then what opportunities open up and bringing lots of disciplines together. So that a little bit of the messages that I got from what you said, but certainly having a very interdisciplinary approach and then bridge as you come to it, as they say, and continue to learn along the way. So very interesting trajectory, and thank you for sharing that with us. Commissioner Walker, I'll turn to you a little bit and tell us a little bit about your career.
Thank you so much, Katherine. And it is indeed my pleasure to be on this platform in this podcast with you and the beautiful Maria Alejandra. She is, you know, I mean, just looking at her, she looks so effervescent, and even listening to her, it's inspirational. And so I thank you for that opportunity that you gave me, you know, for this interaction. But about me, I started actually my career in banking and made the switch about 23 years ago from banking to customs administration. But what drives me was this desire for continued learning, this desire for education, because I realized because of my background and how I grew up, I realized that I needed to secure proper education to move forward. So I got my first degree in accounting and economics, because at one point in my life, I said, well, I wanted to be an accountant. I wanted to be an auditor. However, when I started customs, would you know, as a customs trainee, and call it an intern then, back then. And having started, I was so awed, so impressed by the role of customs, because I didn't understand prior to going into customs the impact that customs had on society. What I knew was from the literature, and the literature keeps telling you sometimes that customs can be an hindrance to trade. So that was my limited knowledge. And when I went inside customs, starting to learn, I recognized the important role and contribution that customs administration made. And so I wanted to be a part of that. Having had that first degree, I decided that I needed to know more. And so I went and did a postgraduate diploma in international trade and shipping, because customs is so connected to trade and shipping. Why not have that designation as well? And so I did that. I furthered my study by also doing a master's in international business. Having recognized that, I started to move along the trajectory in customs and move from different areas. I moved from being a customs officer, having understanding the regular work that is conducted within customs. I then moved on to areas of risk management. I became a risk analyst, dealing with the risk of the organization and helping the organization to grow in that area. I also, at one time in my career in customs, was the public relations officer for the entity at the time. And I probably think that was a mistake. However, it was another tool in the kit, as Maria would have put it, for me to continue to grow and build, because all these positions were building me for what I am now as the head of entity. I became the assistant commissioner for compliance and enforcement. And that is an interesting area, because that's an area that we know to be the area that is led by males. But here you have this young lady in charge of those areas, you know, to deal with enforcement and border protection and security. And so that was quite interesting. That gave me the impetus to say, yes, you have the necessary skills to move on in this organization. And so there was a point in my life when I actually had left customs and was doing consultancy across the region, however, still in customs administration, helping other customs administration, learning from what I would have learned from the Jamaica Customs Department at the time, now agency. And so what I recognized was the importance of the human resource, the importance of having the systems in place to ensure that these human resources are so empowered to do their work, and the importance of team building and being consultative with our decision making, though at times the ultimate decision rests with me. So I have a team, I have a family, and that's how I build my career, by ensuring that people are comfortable, ensuring that they have the necessary resource, and ensuring that they know that I am there for them to help them to execute their task. So for me, I would say so far I've had a wonderful career, and I'm looking forward to the continued years that I have, you know, to continue to contribute to customs administration, to the country, and to the global supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you for that very interesting and comprehensive set of observations. Two things that struck me from what you just said, and that are similar to the points that Maria Alejandra brought up, is the importance of educating oneself. And I think that doesn't, regardless of your gender, but having an education and figuring out what it is you need to be ready when the opportunity comes. So that's number one, and so important. And number two is also the power, understanding the power of public institutions, right? When you said about coming into customs and being awed about when you realized the power that customs has in a country. And, you know, usually people say, oh, customs, you know, it's a little boring, or, you know, they only come in contact with customs as individuals when they, you know, come in and out of a country. But there's so much that customs, that customs contributes to an economy's development, and to facilitating and promoting trade. And as you rightly said, also, and increasingly this role of protecting, you know, the borders and the citizenry of countries, and that, you know, customs has a really heavy responsibility to ensure that. So I share with you very much that feeling of awe. I felt a little bit of that myself in my first internship at the IMF. I sat behind the managing director. I never thought that that would happen to me, and began to understand the power of economic institutions, and how the IMF was promoting strengthened institutions, strengthened public institutions across the world. And that was something that really motivated me as well, just like I sense that motivation in you both. But Commissioner Walker, you brought up a point that was going to be our second sort of question, if you will, our general sort of series of deliberations. It has to do with how to bring women into the customs administration in our countries. Sort of how can we increase not only women's participation in a customs administration, but also promote their roles in executive positions. And I guess in your experience in customs is really important, or a very nice way of understanding how how can we increase the number of women in executive positions, or in the organization in general, but especially to create a pipeline and to promote this strengthened leadership by women and the opportunities for leadership in a customs administration. So let me start with you, Maria Alejandra, because I think you can speak a lot to that, because of what I understand your role has been in Ecuador's customs administration. So over to you.
Sí, gracias, Katherine. Gracias, Velma, por compartir este podcast. Me has hecho disfrutar de tu introducción. Porque realmente esto que tú has planteado, Velma, es lo que voy a decir: cómo incrementar mujeres en posiciones directivas con una sola acción, incrementándolas, decidiendo, nombrándolas. Esto es muy importante lo que estoy planteando, porque la sensación o el techo de cristal que existe en las mujeres es precisamente que cuando una mujer está en un ambiente y tiene que competir por un cargo con alguien, con un hombre, tiene que demostrar. Pero cuando se trata de escoger, decimos, el hombre está listo, la mujer tiene que demostrar un poquito más. Siempre estamos esperando que demuestre un poquito más. Esto es muy importante. Y es muy importante porque cuando los liderazgos son liderazgos directivos, no colaborativos, cuando los liderazgos son de ajetreo, no de resultados, cuando los liderazgos son una muestra o un ejemplo de que tienes que dejar todo lo que te interesa para poder estar en una posición, y no un liderazgo enfocado, con disciplinas. Cuando los liderazgos son discrecionales y no técnicos, la mujer no se quiere atrever. Y no se quiere atrever porque no sabe al final del día qué es lo que va a tener que dejar. Y por supuesto que tiene una serie de intereses y responsabilidades propios de la brecha de desigualdad que existe con la mujer. La mujer tiene una conquista teniendo participación en la vida pública, pero no ha dejado del todo su 100% de participación en la vida privada. Todavía nuestras brechas de igualdad son grandes. Y por eso es importante que apenas como mujeres líderes tomamos un espacio en la vida pública, hay que lograr que los puestos directivos de forma inmediata reconozcan el talento. Les cuento como experiencia, yo llegué a la aduana y me encontré con un porcentaje inferior al 27% de mujeres en cargos directivos. En 6 meses eran el 85% de cargos directivos. Y digo 6 meses para completar, porque al día siguiente el comité ejecutivo era el 90% en cargos directivos. ¿Fue fácil? No fue fácil, porque la respuesta primera es no quiero. Y esto es bien importante, porque para que la mujer esté en cargos directivos, lo primero es su voluntad. Y esa voluntad va a ser más factible o menos factible en la medida en la que el líder le garantice un liderazgo de resultados, un liderazgo disciplinado, un liderazgo equilibrado. Por si acaso, y no importa si eres hombre o mujer, liderazgo moderno, liderazgo equilibrado, donde un ser humano primero es ser humano, donde tienes tiempo para tu familia, para tu lado espiritual, para tu lado deportivo, para tu lado laboral. Lo que queremos son seres humanos, no queremos máquinas, queremos seres humanos para administrar lo público y lo privado. Entonces, lo primero que hicimos fue determinar dónde estaban mujeres con 19 años de experiencia, 20 años de experiencia aduanera, seguían en cargos medios y bajos. ¿Cómo? ¿Cómo puede ser posible? Y esto es muy importante porque esto no espera tiempos. Hay 2 tipos de acciones que tomar. Las acciones afirmativas inmediatas, hay que nombrarlas, tienen que atreverse y evaluar si lo están haciendo bien o si no lo están haciendo bien, como se evalúa a todos los funcionarios. Y por otro lado, acciones a mediano y largo plazo. ¿Cómo promuevo que estos liderazgos vayan cascadeando inspiración? Porque el liderazgo inspira o arruina. Inspira a otros a seguir o determina la voluntad de los otros de no intentarlo. Entonces, creo que lo principal es mover esas voluntades que están allí, que tienen el talento, pero que necesitan una garantía básica de que van a ir a una zona donde no tienen que sacrificar todo el resto de sus intereses por lograr continuar dentro de la vida de los países, laboral, personal. Yo particularmente tengo 20 años de casada, me casé muy joven, tengo 4 hijos, y realmente la disciplina, y lo decía, un liderazgo disciplinado, un liderazgo enfocado a resultados, no a ajetreo. No todo trabajo, no todo ajetreo es trabajo. No todo el tiempo que se invierte en algo da un resultado. Por eso es importante focalizar, enfocar, tener reuniones efectivas, planificación, y que cada individuo se siente y cada mujer se sienta respaldada en todos sus intereses, sean familiares, sean personales, pero que logre contribuir a partir de una decisión libre, voluntaria y valiente. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos promover que las mujeres estén en cargo directivo? Promoviéndolas, dándoles la oportunidad, convenciendo, y adicionalmente, y ya lo puedo conversar un poquito más adelante, generando algunas situaciones importantes dentro del ámbito laboral, que lo podemos conversar más adelante, que son muy relevantes a la hora de tener inclusión de la mujer en la vida pública del país.
Thank you very much, Maria Alejandra. You touched on some really interesting points. The first of which I'd like to summarize as just do it. You know, find the women in your organization who are candidates for leadership positions, and just go ahead and put them in those positions. And of course, it helps when the boss understands, you know, their situation and their conditions and supports them as learning leaders, I like to say, because it takes a while to learn how to be a manager and a leader. And so, you know, having somebody above you who recognizes that and supports that, I think is really important. And the second point you made about having a solid framework for working where, you know, it's recognized that it's a fair workplace, that it's a workplace that recognizes the importance of having work-life balance and having quality of life that will then allow you to really devote your work energies in a productive way, which is, I think, something that many organizations are struggling with or struggle with. It's also not an easy situation, if you will, to achieve, but definitely one very important to keep in mind. Sort of what kind of workplace are you offering people, right? What is the quality of their work going to be to motivate them to want to be there as managers and to try to learn something new on top of what they already know or building on what they already know. So really good points, Maria Alejandra. Thank you for that. I'll turn to Velma to share with us some of your views on how can we promote as organizations and as leaders, how can we create the circumstances where there are more women in leadership positions in customs? And what are some of the factors that you think may have been holding women back from trying to attain management or leadership positions in a customs administration? I'm sure, you know, based on your experience, you have lots of things to share with us. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for those questions, and thanks again to Maria. You know, I often say to my staff population, always remember that I am a human being. Always remember that I am a mom, I am a wife, I am the person who is a CEO commissioner of customs, and I am not trying to be a superwoman. And I say that to them sometimes because society sometimes, as it relates to women in leadership, gives you the impression that you need to prove yourself more. And so I stand in my truth, stand in what I know as my own competence. I know that I have the necessary skill set to deliver the job that I come to do, that I'm there to do. But what prevents a lot of women from being in certain position is what I believe to be the cultural and societal influences, the patriarchal nature sometimes of society that gives this stereotype and this discriminatory way, as we put it, to allow for certain roles to be deemed as a male role vis-a-vis a female role. And so if you grow up culturally believing that, then that's what that stigma and that stereotype will follow you. And that is why I believe in education. I believe in educating yourself so that you learn more and know that that's not the way. It ought not to be the way. Uniquely though, for the Jamaica Customs Agency, the gender divide is more in favor of the women, meaning that we have more women in customs in the Jamaica Customs Agency than men. And that's a unique situation that we have. However, what we feel that contributes to, or what I feel that contributes to the number of women, to more number of women in executive position, is that we have programs, put in institute programs, offer a woman mentorship program so that women have internship opportunities working across the key development function within the administration. So you're giving them opportunity to build, to learn, and to improve on themselves, allow for greater capacity building for women to be suitable candidates for the succession pool within the organization. Maria mentioned, ensuring that the numbers are there, and I support that. You might need to have a quota system to secure a certain number of representation of women in the management corps, and to have that for a set period, so you have continuity and sustainability of it, so, and this, of course, will advance the number of women in management cadre. Importantly, also, you have to have sustainability to advance the number of women and to maintain that with the introduction of gender equality policy, which guide the operation of administration and to ensure that there's equity, not just for women, but also for men going forward. So those are some ways to ensure that we have women in the workforce, but also at the executive level. Now, just to share by way of statistic, we have at the senior management level at the Jamaica Customs, we have 64% who are women and 36% men. So as I said before, that's a very unique position for us. And across the organization, the Jamaican experience is that 68% are women, 32% men across various levels of Jamaica. So we have to get rid of the cultural influences, and I see that permeates within the Caribbean as well, where some roles are perceived to be the male-dominated ones and are not openly encouraged for female to pursue. We also notice there are certain subjects, certain academic areas that is also perceived to be the male-dominated roles. And we have to be careful of that as not only as leaders, but as leaders in the home, as mothers. We have to be careful how we socialize the girls as opposed from the boys. And, you know, so even within customs, certain border regulatory functions that are considered law enforcement are thought of to be rough and brawn. And so typically there's a gender stereotype there for male dominance. We need to get rid of that situation. The length of work that we do in customs also sometimes will discourage females or women from having the time to do their home duties or their, you know, to allow them to nurture and care for the family. And so sometimes that discourages the women from wanting to take up certain roles. We need to get behind that and put in the necessary infrastructure to allow for equal opportunity and cause this a paradigm shift and to encourage a succession pool of candidates, given the opportunity at managerial roles in administration. So there's a lot has been happening, but there are a lot more to be done. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. And I especially like your sort of stepping back and saying, look, this is the way the world works, and, you know, highlighting the cultural influences, the societal influences, expectations and biases, and that those do play a role in how women can be seen as effective managers and leaders of an organization such as customs. And then how can you address those, you know, starting by naming a woman leader and then starting to change a little bit that perception, right? And that can also percolate down into other managerial levels of the organization. So, you know, making those changes and having a pipeline, for example, being able to assign women to non-traditional roles or roles that have traditionally been carried out by men, to see and supporting them, because they also will do it differently and will have different needs in carrying out those roles. But, you know, I very much appreciate you bringing up, you know, the context, which is so important for all of our organizations. And finally, just want to contribute from my own experience. Yes, the importance of having a role model, right? So I remember coming into the IMF around 2012 as a division chief, and Christine Lagarde had been named the first woman managing director of the IMF all those years ago. And it really was it has been a bit of a revolution inside the IMF itself and as an international organization. And, you know, the signal that sent internationally and also within an international organization, that women would have more opportunities to show how they could manage and lead within the organization, and how important that's been, you know, to have a role model and to have someone at the very top who's promoting greater participation of women in the managerial and executive levels. So I think that's really important. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, Maria Alejandra and Vilma, to a question that I think is really important, and that I'd like to hear what your views, which is the following. So we're talking about not only women in customs, but what can customs do for women in the economy, right? And so it's a pretty broad question. I'm curious to see what you have to say. So in your view, what types of policies can a customs administration adopt that would help increase women's participation in the economy? So what kinds of policies can customs introduce or adopt that, in your view, would facilitate or help increase women's participation in your country's economy?
Gracias, Katherine. Uno de los temas que quiero dejar planteado es: cuando una mujer llega a un cargo directivo, no puede dejar de pensar en todas las demás, ni en la promoción de liderazgos internos, como en la toma de decisiones para que para las demás sea más fácil el camino. Para transformar hay que estar, pero estar para algo, para transformar algo que sabemos que no es correcto, que no está bien. Entonces, el primer punto es reconocer que nuestro principal rol es abrirle camino a las que vienen detrás. Y que las que vienen detrás tengan un camino más fácil para poder continuar, porque el camino no se cierra fácilmente. Y es por eso que dentro de una administración aduanera, teniendo claro que uno de los principales y fundamentales puntos para lograr cerrar brechas de desigualdad entre la mujer y el hombre en una sociedad es la independencia económica, que es uno de los factores. Es justamente en las administraciones del sector económico donde están las políticas públicas que permiten facilitar la independencia económica a las mujeres, que son principalmente las que manejan las pequeñas y las medianas empresas. Entonces, si estamos claros en que una líder mujer se siente en su cargo el primer día y tiene dos tareas para transformar: nombrar mujeres en cargos directivos y pensar qué políticas puedo facilitar para lograr la independencia económica de la mujer, ya estamos transformando. Ya estamos transformando. Y me voy a ir a este segundo punto, que es tu pregunta, Katherine, y es uno de los factores fundamentales para la mujer siendo la independencia económica. Eso requiere de varios aspectos tributarios económicos. Primero, la promoción de la facilitación. Si hablamos que más del 70% de las mujeres, por lo menos en Ecuador, se dedican a temas de comercio y servicios, ¿cómo hago que eso, que es a lo que se dedican, sea más fácil? Y es allí donde la aplicación de las políticas de facilitación son una prioridad. Y la facilitación atada al acceso, a la capacidad o a la posibilidad de consultar a la administración cómo hago, comprendiendo que no todas las mujeres tienen independencia económica y que lo poco que ganan y que lo quieren invertir para poder generar ese acceso a la función pública. Entonces, me voy a un segundo punto. La política debe incluir facilitación y humanización, cercanía. Tengo que permitirle preguntar, acercarse. Y tengo que facilitarle, permitirle preguntar y acompañar. Pero adicionalmente, tengo que salir de mi silo, tengo que salir de mi metro cuadrado y poder coordinar con otras instituciones del área económica la posibilidad de acceso a créditos que puedan generar la incursión de la mujer en el comercio internacional. Solo para que tengan una idea, en Ecuador de las 8.8 millones de mujeres que somos, cerca de 3 se dedican a la ruralidad y se dedican a la agricultura y se dedican también al sector acuícola. El 90% de nuestras exportaciones es eso, el 90%. Y por otro lado, el 50% de nuestras importaciones están enfocadas en el sector comercial, al que se dedica más del 70% de la mujer. Solamente en pandemia, desde el 2020 hasta lo que va del 2021, cerca de 14.000 nuevos operadores de comercio se han incrementado en nuestro registro, del cual cerca del 60% son mujeres. ¿Y por qué lo hicieron? Lo hicieron porque hace 2 años empezamos la facilitación. Hace 2 años empezamos el camino de la facilitación, acompañados del Fondo Monetario Internacional, que aquí veo a protagonistas de esto. En misiones internacionales que nos llevaron ¿a qué? A hacer más sencilla, con mayores seguridades, pero más sencillo el acceso. Entonces, lo que quisiera dejar un poco en el ambiente de esta discusión es, el liderazgo de la mujer implica que apenas se siente en su cargo debe invertir sus primeras firmas en promover a mujeres en lugares directivos. Y luego, en general, la hoja de ruta para permitir a las mujeres acceder a independencia económica. Y eso requiere de planes internos como de coordinación con otras instituciones que le permitan ingresar al sector precisamente del comercio y del comercio internacional con la seguridad, con la facilidad y con la técnica y el acercamiento que solo un servicio público humanizado te puede dar. Yo no voy donde me siento rechazado. Yo voy donde siento que puedo consultar y encontrar una compañía. Y es eso lo que se promueve interna y externamente. Entonces, simplemente para resumir, facilitación del comercio, reactivación a través de crédito y la posibilidad de que las nuevas mujeres que quieran incursionar en el sector del comercio tengan cómo acceder a consulta, acompañamiento permanente. Eso básicamente.
Very, very interesting, Maria Alejandra, and thank you for that sort of the principles, but also some really concrete examples of how customs administrations can broaden their reach to include women. And something you said reminded me of this policy or recommendation that we often make in the IMF, which is you need to target your policies to a certain sector or a certain group or a certain risk, right? And so what you're saying is, in order to be able to include successfully or to have policies that include women in the economy, in the commercial sector, export sector, in their ability to run their businesses and to have, as you say, economic independence, you need to be able to target this part of your economy and to understand what it is they need in order to become more active and to be able to access services that they may have traditionally thought were too complicated, or maybe even a hostile reception from the point of view of the administration. So your point about the human aspect, I think, is really so important. So targeting, but also really making an effort to open the door to women entrepreneurs of different types and in different sectors. So really interesting observations that you bring out. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to turn now to Velma and get your views on what types of policies can a customs administration adopt that could help increase women's participation in the economy. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Katherine. We have to be serious about the liberation of our girls and women. We have to be serious about their contribution to the economy. And one way to do that is to disaggregate the data and look at gender in terms of how it contributes to the economy, how gender contributes to education, how gender contributes to micro, small businesses, but also from a national perspective. It is important that there is a national policy that also guides that. But that doesn't stop the customs administration from adopting certain policies to drive gender and drive the women, increasing more women to participate in the labor force and the economy. I also want to mention that within Jamaica, you'll see that there is a distinct drive to ensure that gender is a focal point and is captured, where we have a Ministry of Culture, Gender and Entertainment and Sport within Jamaica, which would feed certain policy directive down to the other ministries, departments and agencies, which is a good way to go about it. But what we notice is that we have to ensure that the opportunity remains there. Now, how can we help as customs? By adopting gender mainstreaming. The adaptation of gender mainstreaming will certainly provide a foundation to foster gender equality. And I speak about gender equality a lot, even though within the Jamaica Customs Agency, we have more women than men. But what we have realized also is that we are getting good output from the agency. Now you make your own inference from that, but we're getting good output. what I notice is that mainstreaming as a gender perspective, it really is a process that provides a foundation to foster gender equality, right? And it's not only about women, but it's also about men. So it's a balanced view. Having said that, you need to ensure that the gender mainstreaming allows for gender equality, for us to achieve gender equality or equity policy. Now, what that will ensure is that both men and women are provided with the requisite resources and capacity development for opportunity to equip them for growth within administration and society. What we have been doing in the Jamaica Customs Agency is we have developed a gender action plan, which we implemented to look at the inherent gaps with the intent to recreate and enforce a culture of equality, a culture of equity concerning both men and women. And importantly, there's an era of taboo that sometimes is not spoken of. But what we also want to ensure is that the administration has policies to deal with sexual harassment and gender-based violence, because we want to make sure that we are an entity that do not support certain violence or any violence or of certain nature against women or even men. And so we attest to that commitment and ensure that the workspace is a safe and favorable environment to enable women to be comfortable and to be productive. So we want to ensure that these policies are in place, these action plans are being looked at, are being measured, and to ensure that we are doing the right thing to support women participating in the labor force and to be productive in the economy. We have to get it right for our girls, we have to get it right for our women, and to support them at all times. I believe strongly that we have to ensure that they are liberated and give them the tools to foster that. One of the things that we did as a customs administration is that we move outside of what our core processes normally is, and we have had extensive stakeholder program targeting the women who work in certain areas and give them certain data, certain information, so that they can use that to their advantage and build and be better in looking at traded goods and how those goods they can get economic opportunities from. And we call the program Customs Meets the Community, where we go to various areas and speak to individuals and bring them in by providing them with certain information. That has been going well, but of course, as a consequence of COVID-19, we had to put a pause on that and have moved our program virtually. You know, of course, the digital divide sometimes limits that reach as well, but we continue to do the work to support our women and to build them in the economy. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you very much, Velma. Again, talking a little bit about targeting a group, right? How can you create policies that are made for a certain group that you want to have their behavior change, or to promote their knowledge about what's available to them to become active in, in the commercial or in the trade sector. So thank you very much for sharing that. And both of you say something interesting about, evidence and data. And I think you're very right about that part of this whole conversation, if you will, is bringing out what the benefits can be of incorporating women more actively in the economy. And one of the things that really struck me a few years ago when the IMF started doing studies on including women more actively in the economy, much more actively in the economy, that a study was done by a group of IMF economists that found that world economic output could potentially increase on the order of 20% of world GDP by incorporating women into the workforce across the world. And I think that just having that as a benchmark, right? I mean, that's a starting point, is actually quite remarkable, and maybe something that many people, including women, haven't really thought about. I mean, you have a certain size of your economy, you could potentially, if you will, increase the pie. You could increase the whole pie, without necessarily having, a minus for a group, but you can increase economic welfare. You can increase the size of your economy, and that's by incorporating women more actively into the labor force and helping them participate. And that's a pretty remarkable figure if you look at it, on a worldwide scale. So I don't want to close without a final question, because this is really important for us, for the IMF, and that's the following. What play in supporting customs administrations to improve gender diversity and strengthen customs in your country, for example? So what are your views on what role the IMF can play in supporting customs administrations to improve gender diversity, including at the management and executive levels? Over to you, María Alejandra.
Gracias, Katherine. Bueno, creo que la oportunidad es muy grande y creo que la capacidad que el fondo tiene de poder incidir positivamente en la inclusión de la mujer y el cierre de una brecha histórica es muy alta. Una de las decisiones que la mujer siempre va a evaluar cuando se va a integrar a la administración aduanera o tributaria es la confianza que le da esa administración aduanera y tributaria. Creo que hay tres áreas muy importantes que deben quedar sentadas en una administración para atraer ese talento, donde el Fondo Monetario y su experiencia pueden ser muy importantes. Son muy importantes. La primera es el plan de desarrollo de talento y el plan de desarrollo de liderazgo. Es la institucionalización en las administraciones aduaneras de planes de desarrollo de talento y de liderazgo. ¿Bien? Que eso es un tema no soft, es un tema técnico, muy importante desde la perspectiva del desarrollo del talento. ¿Bien? Es la planificación de carrera y la planificación de desarrollo en las administraciones aduaneras. Lo que va a permitir una profesionalización de una forma inclusiva y no de una forma excluyente. Entonces, cuando eso lo traducimos en proceso, facilita el camino hacia la inclusión de una forma ordenada y sistemática. El segundo pilar es el compliance y la línea de denuncias. Es muy importante generar un espacio de confianza donde tanto la mujer como el hombre, pero principalmente la mujer, porque estamos partiendo de una realidad, debe tener implementado el proceso de compliance y, por otro lado, de línea de denuncias, ¿no? Que permita sentir que está en una institución donde no va a tener un riesgo. Y si lo tiene, tiene a quién decírselo. ¿Bien? Esto es muy importante. Y esto también es implementación sistemática. Lo hicimos en la aduana. Mi primera firma la invertí en la primera oficina de fortalecimiento ético y lucha contra la corrupción en la aduana. Esa fue mi primera inversión. Y fue mi primera inversión porque abrimos una línea de denuncias utilizada en el 70% por mujeres. Por mujeres. Entonces, esto es muy importante. Esto es muy importante para promover esa inclusión. Y eso implica el desarrollo de áreas específicas y la sistematización de programas de compliance y de línea de denuncias. Y lo tercero es donde nosotros como ecuatorianos y la aduana del Ecuador se basó en su gestión, y allí el Fondo Monetario fue crucial, y es la técnica. Las administraciones aduaneras deben poder basarse en proceso y técnica para reducir al mínimo la discrecionalidad, al mínimo. Y eso solo se hace a través de sistema ordenado, de procesos y de tecnología. Las dos misiones que tuvimos con el Fondo Monetario y que estamos terminando de implementar tienen que ver con procesos, con técnica. El talento busca lo que es seguro y lo que me desarrolla. El talentoso busca lo que le hace crecer, no lo que le hace retroceder. Y lo que no arriesga su vida, tanto en lo personal como en lo profesional. Si la técnica es clara, si el proceso es claro, entonces me atrevo. Y el rol del fondo se convierte en crucial porque adicionalmente cuenta con toda la experiencia para poder llegar a hacer procesos simples desde la concepción del proceso, pero absolutamente fructíferos y eficientes desde el enfoque de riesgos. Entonces, creo que el reto es grande, pero creo que la oportunidad es más grande todavía. Y es sistema de desarrollo de talentos, técnica en compliance y denuncias y técnica en el proceso. Mientras pasemos de liderazgos directivos, confusos, de ajetreo, a liderazgos colaborativos, técnicos, claros y con enfoque en resultados, naturalmente vamos a tener una respuesta de forma inmediata en la promoción del talento y en la confianza de la mujer para asumir mayor cantidad de riesgos dentro de la administración tributaria o aduanera. Entonces, yo creo que hay una enorme oportunidad y, como le digo, el Ecuador es un ejemplo de ello. Nosotros nos enfocamos en 2 misiones internacionales, las 2 fueron con el fondo, y nos enfocamos en cumplirlo. Y lo que tuvimos de resultados en menos de un año fue fue la implementación del Acuerdo de Facilitación de Comercio, reducir a la mitad los tiempos de desaduanización, aumentar del 27 al 85% en mujeres en cargos directivos, adicionalmente homologar procesos con la administración tributaria, focalizar controles, reducir cerca del 14% de costos a los operadores de comercio internacional, y podría seguir y continuar con la cantidad de resultados positivos, solamente con un liderazgo de enfoque, técnica, proceso y riesgos. Yo creo que esa es la invitación principal a un equipo que tiene toda la posibilidad de contribuir en esa línea al cierre de las brechas en igualdad de género.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that and for bringing out and for making the link between what the IMF can do and is doing and its impact on women in the organization and women in the economy. Because if you strengthen or improve the way that customs administration works, then it will also directly and indirectly open the door to greater participation by women, both in the organization and in the economy with a better functioning customs. So thanks a lot for making that link that's not always so obvious. So thank you. I turn to you, Velma, from your point of view, what role can the IMF play in supporting customs administrations to improve gender diversity in Jamaica from your point of view?
Thank you, Katherine. IMF as a multilateral organization, as a global institution, as an entity that we all look at for whether it be technical assistance, advice, support in whatever format, always should, and I know, lead by example. And so IMF, I am sure, supports equal work for equal pay, supports competency-based recruitments, support performance management and incentives, and properly measure same. And so in that context, the IMF can support customs administration with technical assistance to launch their own gender diversity programs where they can also be fully developed. But also, what can also be done is that you marry those technical assistance to gender program to ensure, as prior action, that these gender issues, gender diversity programs are actually implemented and are sustained and continued, by also advocating for high level participation in gender activities, such as, we didn't mention about the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which speaks to gender equality, seeking to align individual countries at the local level with gender mainstreaming activities. So that is also important. Ultimately, helping them or us to reap the reward of diversity and innovation. We also, the gender action plan is important, and we have to ensure that there is a tool developed, training developed, to look at the gaps and how to mitigate and to ensure that the administrations are able to have proper intervention to continue to develop and to formulate the best strategies in pushing the mandate of gender equality and diversity. So there is some things that the IMF can do, and I am sure the IMF as leaders will continue to play its part and continue to help the customs administration in pushing gender diversity, gender equality agenda forward. So that's it for me on that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Velma. And it is inspiring to hear that actually the IMF can play a role and what that could be. And we're actually thinking now a lot about that. What can we do to support countries in a more structured way to advance gender equality and women's participation in public sector institutions and economic institutions such as customs administration. So I hope we will be thinking together with both of you how we can structure this so that we can advise countries and also learn from each other that when countries are doing something that's working and working well, that we can share that knowledge and that experience with others. So this is just, I would say, a beginning conversation. I'm mindful that we've been chatting for an hour, and I really want to say thank you because I've learned a lot this brief hour that I've spoken with both of you, and just please rest assured that we at the IMF are going to take your observations and your suggestions and your experiences and incorporate them into our work and think about how we can go one step further in our work and in strengthening customs administrations in your region and elsewhere. So this has been terrifically interesting, very interesting, and such a pleasure to see both of you. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules to chat with me today, and we really look forward to the next chat on this topic, maybe to see everything we've been able to achieve, some of the advances we've been able to make. But thank you again. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias por la invitación. Lo hemos disfrutado mucho y creo que nos quedamos con esa máxima, ¿no? Cuando esto es el mejor tiempo invertido para seguir inspirando, para seguir trayendo todas las que vienen detrás. Gracias, muchísimas gracias, Velma, muchas gracias. Katherine, muchas gracias.
A pleasure, un placer.
Thank you, Maria. I certainly enjoy the dialogue, I enjoy the connection, and I enjoy just being in the space with you ladies. So thank you so much. It was indeed my pleasure and privilege.
Gracias.
Likewise.